For 38 years, Nathan Bridgewater lived with the conviction that he was an ordinary man, raised in a modest factory worker's family. He believed his life was defined, a loving son who regularly helped his parents financially, a caring brother always present at family celebrations, and a man who never left his mother's side during her 6-month battle with chemotherapy. However, on one unremarkable Tuesday in March, all his certainty about his own identity crumbled like a house of cards. In the somber ward of Cleveland Central Hospital, where his mother Dorothy was fading from cancer, a heavy atmosphere prevailed. Life support monitors emitted monotonous beeps, while his brother Dennis stood by the window, incessantly checking his phone. His sister Marlene, settled in a corner, calmly did her nails as if it were just another day. Nathan had always felt a certain detachment between them, as if they were cut from a different cloth, but he attributed it to the peculiarities of family dynamics. Suddenly, Dorothy's eyes opened, and a clarity Nathan hadn't seen in weeks flickered within them. Her fingers, emaciated and cold like bird bones, clutched his wrist with unexpected strength. She pulled him so close that he caught the sharp scent of medicine and impending death. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice raspy like the rustle of dry leaves. "I have to tell you the truth before I go. You're not my son." For a split second, he thought it was the morphine. He tried to pull away to call a nurse, but her grip only tightened. "Listen to me," she said louder, drawing the attention of Dennis, who looked up from his phone, and Marlene, who stopped filing her nails. "I stole you from a billionaire family in 1985. Your real name is Christopher Rothwell. Your father owns half of Manhattan." Silence enveloped the room, broken only by the quickening beeps of the cardiac monitor. Dorothy's eyes rolled back, her grip slackened, and 20 minutes later, she was gone. The last words spoken by his mother were a confession that he had never been her son. Dennis was the first to recover. He swiftly crossed the room and forcefully shoved Nathan against the wall. "I always felt there was something off about you," he growled, leaving dirty smudges from his working hands on Nathan's collar. 38 years pretending to be our brother, and you didn't even know it." Marlene slowly rose, her grocery store name tag still pinned to her shirt from her morning shift. "No wonder Mom always looked at you differently," she said in an icy tone. "It wasn't love, it was guilt, overwhelming guilt for what she did." Nathan was thrown out of the hospital before Dorothy's body had even cooled. Dennis snatched his wallet from his pocket, taking the $300 he had brought for the funeral. "Consider that payment for 38 years of living off us, you bastard," he scoffed, as security escorted Nathan from the building. "Forget about ever coming back to our fake family." The next 3 months, Nathan spent at the Burke Lakefront homeless shelter, scraping by on odd jobs and trying to comprehend how his entire life had been built on a lie and an abduction. He had no documents, no family, no proof of his existence. Nathan Bridgewater was the son of a woman who stole a child. Christopher Rothwell was merely a ghost, vanished nearly 40 years ago. But yesterday, as he stood in line for food at the shelter, 2 men in expensive suits found him. Roger Blackstone introduced himself as a private detective, and Anthony Corral as an estate lawyer. They had been looking for him ever since his mother's deathbed confession leaked to a local newspaper. "Your biological father is Sterling Rothwell," Blackstone informed him, presenting DNA test results from a coffee cup Nathan had discarded. "He owns 43 commercial properties in Manhattan, totaling $2.4 billion. He's been looking for you since 1985 and never lost hope." Corral opened his briefcase and pulled out a will. Nathan's name, his real name, Christopher Sterling Rothwell III, was listed as the sole heir. "Your father is dying," the lawyer said. "He has perhaps 2 weeks left. He wants to see his son before he passes." The truth, like a lightning bolt, blinded him, destroying his former reality. Blackstone, leaning forward, uttered the fateful words that chilled his blood. Dorothy Bridgewater was Sterling's biological sister. Not just a kidnapper, but his own aunt, who raised him under a false name, watching her brother build an empire she believed was rightfully hers. The family he yearned for was an illusion. His true relatives, whose existence he never suspected, had been searching for him for years. The woman he called mother wove a web of lies that enveloped 38 years of his life and left indelible wounds on many hearts. He stood, as if struck by lightning, within the shabby walls of the shelter, wearing the same clothes as 3 days ago, with documents in hand confirming his fabulous fortune. The realization that his entire life was an elaborate deception, a crime rooted in a past family betrayal, crashed down upon him. The rain, which had begun the day Dorothy died, continued to pour, and in that moment, it seemed this endless sorrow would never end. Growing up in the industrial heart of Cleveland meant waking not to birdsong, but to the deafening roar of factory whistles, breathing air saturated with the smell of metal, and watching his parents visibly age, losing years of their lives to arduous labor. Their modest duplex on Stockton Avenue, squeezed between two abandoned warehouses, was a place where delivery drivers double-checked their car locks and pizzerias stopped delivering after dark. But for him, it was home. And for 38 years, he believed he understood what that meant. His father, Harold Bridgewater, was a rock of a man, the embodiment of strength and reliability. Nearly 2 meters tall, with hands that could palm a basketball or loosen a rusted bolt, he worked 2 shifts at the Cleveland steel mill, returning home at midnight covered in a layer of metallic dust no amount of water could remove. "Hard work makes a man honest," he'd often say, ruffling Nathan's hair with his massive hands. "We may not have much, but what we do have, we earned with sweat and blood." Harold died when Nathan was just 15. During a lift, a crane cable snapped and a 2-ton steel beam plummeted. The company paid them $20,000 and sent a letter disclaiming all responsibility. Dorothy aged 10 years overnight. Her brown hair turned gray, her shoulders stooped under the burden of worries as she sat at the kitchen table, trying to calculate how to stretch that money and Harold's modest insurance to raise 3 children alone. Dennis was 18 and already working part-time at Kowalski's auto shop. He inherited his father's powerful build and volatile temper. The day after the funeral, he dropped out of school. "I'm the man of the house now," he declared, which meant drinking Harold's leftover beer and picking on Nathan for reading too much. "Books won't feed you," he'd grumble, calling him a nerd, though college was out of the question for people like them. Marlene, a 12-year-old girl with sharp knees and a tough demeanor, had already learned that the world gave nothing for free. She secretly counted the money in Dorothy's purse, trying to figure out what they could afford for dinner. At 14, she started working illegally at Petrowski's Market, packing groceries and lying about her age with such conviction that even Nathan almost believed she was 16. But he was always different, and everyone knew it. While Dennis and Marlene inherited Harold's dark eyes and strong features, Nathan had green eyes, which Dorothy said came from some distant ancestors. His hair was lighter, his build more slender. He could do numbers in his head faster than Dennis could on a calculator. When the electric company made a mistake on their bill, he was the one who spotted it, saving the family a much-needed $80. Nathan, in Dorothy's opinion, had a sharp mind, but she'd say these words while avoiding eye contact, as if seeing someone else behind him. After drinking wine, which she consumed more frequently after Harold's death, her trembling fingers might touch Nathan's face. "You're so much like," she'd begin, then correct herself, "your grandfather." My father had the same eyes. Nathan unofficially took on the role of family accountant. Every Sunday, he'd bend over the scratched kitchen table with Dorothy's checkbook in hand, determining which bills needed immediate payment, which could be deferred, and which creditors to call with promises that might not be kept. Dennis expressed resentment, accusing Nathan of arrogance. Marlene called him Mom's favorite, but there was no warmth in Dorothy's regard for him. Rather, there was a cautious distance, as if Nathan were a fragile porcelain figurine she feared breaking. After high school, Nathan got a job at Thurman's distribution center, where over 15 years he rose from loader to warehouse manager. The pay was modest, but steady. Each month he sent home $500, which Dorothy accepted with the same detached expression. "You're a good son," she'd say, as if reciting a line from a play she'd performed too often. When Dorothy was struck by pancreatic cancer, the illness came suddenly. Nathan took time off to drive her to appointments. Dennis cited busyness at the workshop. Marlene, promoted to shift manager at the grocery store, claimed she couldn't risk her job. So Nathan sat in waiting rooms, permeated with the smell of disinfectants, fearfully clutching Dorothy's hand as the poisonous fluid dripped into her veins, hoping it would destroy the cancer before it destroyed her. On the morning of Dorothy's death, the family gathered at Cleveland Central Hospital, as doctors had warned her end was near. Dennis complained about missing a day of work. Marlene, engrossed in her phone, only occasionally looked up to ask when it would all be over. Nathan sat by Dorothy's bed, watching her breathe, wondering why he felt the loss of a person he never truly knew. Looking back, he realizes he was right. He never truly knew Dorothy Bridgewater, and she did everything to ensure he never knew himself either. Dorothy's confession split the hospital room like a lightning bolt. As the cardiac monitor flatlined and nurses rushed in, Dennis grabbed Nathan's shoulder and spun him around. What did she just say? Dennis's face was red, veins bulging in his neck, as if drunk and looking for a fight. She just said you're not her son? The medical team ushered them into the hallway as they tried to revive Dorothy, but it was clear she was beyond saving. Marlene, frozen against the wall with her mouth open, looked at Nathan as if seeing him for the first time. She stole you from a billionaire? What the hell is she talking about? Dennis forcefully shoved Nathan against a vending machine. I knew it. I always felt there was something off about you, your speech, your manners, that arrogance with numbers and clean hands. You were never one of us. Dennis, I didn't know, Nathan replied, trying to process what he'd heard. How could I have known? Sterling Rothwell, Marlene said, already searching on her phone. Holy crap, Dennis, look at this. Sterling Rothwell owns half of Manhattan. His company is worth billions. It says here his son was kidnapped in 1985 and never found. She looked at Nathan with a cold gaze. That's you. You're the stolen child. The doctor came out to officially pronounce Dorothy dead, but Dennis and Marlene barely paid attention. Their focus was now on Nathan, circling him like wolves sensing prey. 38 years, Dennis stated, raising his voice. 38 years Mom fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof over your head, and you weren't even her son. And you were nobody to raise her, came the blow, like a punch to the gut. She was my mother, he replied, trying to maintain composure. She raised me. I'm still your brother. Marlene let out a laugh devoid of any warmth or empathy. Brother, you're nothing to us. You're a rich man's stolen child. Do you really think you belong here, that you have a right to anything of ours? They stood in the hospital parking lot as if on a battlefield. Dennis roughly shoved him forward, while Marlene, glued to her phone screen, continued to deliver the verdict. It says here, Sterling Rothwell never stopped searching. He spent a fortune trying to find his son. An entire foundation was set up for it. She cast a look of contempt at him. While we ate mac and cheese 4 times a week, your real father lived in a luxurious penthouse. Dennis, like a predator, reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. That's Mom's funeral money, he protested, desperately trying to get his funds back. Mom's? Dennis mimicked, stuffing the $300 into his pocket. She wasn't your mom, remember? Consider it payment for all the years you lived with us. He threw the empty wallet to the ground like a useless object. Dennis, Marlene, please, where do I go? His voice was pleading. Not our problem, Marlene snapped, already on the phone. He heard snippets of phrases, his name, address, something about fraud. Yes, he was living under a false name. The real Nathan Bridgewater probably died years ago. This guy is a rich kid who was kidnapped. Security appeared as if on cue. Dennis claimed Nathan was harassing them, that he had no rights to the deceased. Check the records, he insisted. Dorothy Bridgewater has 2 children, Dennis and Marlene. This man is an imposter who tricked his way into our lives. The guards escorted him off the premises. When he tried to approach his car, Dennis held up the keys. You drove Harold's truck, he declared. Harold Bridgewater was my father, not yours, so the truck stays in the family. He walked 4 miles to his apartment, lost in thought. Fragments of memories flashed through his mind, suddenly making new sense. Dorothy's guilty glance, her fear when he showed mathematical aptitude, her reluctance to talk about his early childhood, explaining it by saying they didn't have money for camera film. At his door, the landlord was waiting with a locksmith. Mr. Chen called, he said, avoiding Nathan's gaze. Mr. Chen was Dennis and Marlene's cousin, a small-time lawyer. He says there are questions about your identity. We can't have someone living here under a false name. You have 10 minutes to collect your things. 10 minutes to gather the shattered pieces of 38 years of a life that, it turned out, was never his. He grabbed clothes, his father's watch, which wasn't really his father's watch, a photograph of Dorothy he couldn't leave behind, no matter what. Dennis had already called the bank, reporting suspicious transactions on an account he claimed Dorothy had fraudulently opened in someone else's name. The account was frozen, pending investigation. By nightfall, he stood outside the Burke Lakefront homeless shelter with 2 trash bags full of belongings and a complete lack of understanding of who he really was. Nathan Bridgewater was dead. Perhaps he had never existed. Christopher Rothwell was merely a ghost from the past, a missing child from a world he couldn't imagine. He was caught between 2 lives, a man without a name, without family, without a single piece of evidence of his existence. 3 months at the Burke Lakefront shelter opened his eyes to the fact that rock bottom has its own basement, and that basement has a secret sub-basement no one talks about. From warehouse manager, he became a day laborer, grabbing any job, moving furniture, cleaning foreclosed homes, anything that didn't require paperwork. His hands, once soft from office work, became cracked and bloody. He learned which 24-hour stores threw out still edible food, which churches offered meals without sermons, and which corners to avoid after dark. After dark, as everyone knows, city alleyways hide dangers and are best avoided. Thursday began quite ordinarily for the protagonist, Nathan Bridgewater. He stood in line for a free meal at the Burke Lakefront shelter, holding a worn plastic tray. The man in front of him loudly complained about the portion sizes, while the woman behind him reeked of cheap vodka, indicating her propensity for self-medication. Nathan, accustomed to such surroundings, tried not to draw attention to himself, knowing that invisibility was his best way to survive in this place. Suddenly, a loud voice broke the silence. "Nathan Bridgewater." 2 impeccably dressed men approached him, their suits likely costing more than his monthly income. Everyone in the food line curiously turned towards them. The appearance of men in expensive suits at the Burke Lakefront shelter was an extraordinary event, portending either a tragic death or an arrest. "I'm Roger Blackstone," the older man introduced himself, extending a business card with "Private Investigator" printed on it and a Manhattan office address. "This is Anthony Corll, an estate lawyer. We've been looking for you for 3 months. Nathan, still holding his tray, replied, "If this is about a debt to Dennis, I have nothing left to take." "This concerns your father," Corral explained, "your biological father, Sterling Rothwell." The name, like a splash of icy water, made him flinch. He hastily placed the tray on the table, afraid of dropping it. "How did you find me?" Nathan asked, surprised. Blackstone displayed a clear evidence bag containing a coffee cup. "A DNA sample taken from a cup you discarded yesterday at the 7-Eleven on Euclid Avenue. We checked shelters, hospitals, churches. Your mother's confession leaked to the local news. A small note buried on page 6, but Sterling has people who monitor any mention of the abduction." "Please come with us," Corll offered. "There's a conference room at the Marriott downtown. We need to speak privately." Nathan glanced at his dirty and worn clothes. "I'm not exactly dressed for the Marriott." "Mr. Rothwell," Blackstone said, and the address made Nathan's heart clench. "You could be dressed in a garbage bag and still be Sterling Rothwell's son." In the Marriott conference room, panoramic windows offered breathtaking views of Lake Erie. Corll opened his leather briefcase and spread documents on the polished table: birth certificates, DNA test results, photographs that made Nathan's hands tremble. The pictures showed a baby with green eyes, just like his own. A young couple held the infant, a woman with the same shade of hair as Nathan, and a man with his jawline. "Your father is Sterling Rothwell," Blackstone began, sliding a recent photograph towards him. It showed an elderly man in a hospital bed, but even in his dying state, his face exuded strength. "He owns Rothwell Real Estate Holdings, 43 commercial properties in Manhattan, including 2 entire blocks in Midtown. The portfolio is valued at $2.4 billion. Your mother was Patricia Rothwell, née Morrison," Corll added, showing another photo. It depicted a beautiful woman with green eyes full of life. "She died in a car accident in 1988. Your father never remarried and had no other children. He said losing both of you broke him beyond repair." "Dorothy Bridgewater worked as a maid for your family in 1985, Blackstone continued. "She was told she couldn't have children after numerous miscarriages. On the night of October 15th, during a charity gala at the estate, she took you from the nursery. She had been planning it for months, preparing fake documents in a car. She drove straight to Ohio to a cousin who helped her create a new identity. Your father never believed you were dead, Coral said. The FBI, the police, everyone else gave up, but Sterling continuously hired private detectives for 38 years. He spent approximately $12 million searching for you. Nathan looked at the documents, each one turning his entire life upside down. Why now? He asked. Why were you able to find me when no one else could? How was it that he was discovered when everyone else had failed? Dorothy's deathbed confession. Blackstone's voice resonated, like an echo from the past. One of our operatives, like a tireless sentinel, tracked news feeds, searching for keywords related to this case. And when Dorothy's name surfaced in connection with a long-ago confession about a child abduction in distant 1985, we immediately launched an investigation, like hounds on a scent. Your DNA, like irrefutable evidence, confirmed our wildest suspicions. Corral, like a sympathetic doctor, spoke softly. Your father is at death's door. Liver cancer, like a merciless executioner, has reached stage 4. Doctors, like soothsayers, give him no more than 2 weeks. He yearns to see his son before he leaves this world forever. He seeks to atone for 38 years of injustice, like a heavy sin weighing on his soul. He extracted the last document from his briefcase, thick like an old telephone directory. This is his will. You are the sole heir. The entire estate passes to Christopher Sterling Roth. That is you, he announced solemnly. I know nothing about real estate, he protested, as if trying to push away the wealth that had fallen upon him. I only managed a warehouse. For 3 months, I wandered the streets, homeless. You've clearly got the wrong man. We found exactly whom we were looking for, Blackstone confidently stated. But there's something else you need to know about Dorothy Bridgewater, something we discovered while meticulously examining her past, something that sheds light on this entire tangled story. The private jet smoothly touched down on the Teterboro Airport runway, like a celestial guest arriving just in time for sunset over Manhattan. The window offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, those legendary towers of glass and steel that Sterling Rothwell had once helped erect. Blackstone, like a caring guardian, bought him a suit at the hotel shop. Nothing fancy, but clean and well-fitting. In it, he felt like an imposter, like a homeless man attending a costume ball, which, in essence, he was. The penthouse, like an impregnable fortress, occupied the top 2 floors of a building on Fifth Avenue, offering a mesmerizing view of Central Park. The elevator, as if by magic, opened directly into a spacious hall. Marble floors reflected the light of crystal chandeliers, creating an atmosphere of luxury and grandeur. At the door, they were met by a nurse in an immaculate white uniform, like a guardian angel. He's been asking for you every hour, she whispered, as if afraid to disturb the fragile calm. He's conscious, but we don't know how long it will last. Sterling Rothwell lay in a hospital bed, set up in what had once been his private study. The windows, like enormous screens, showcased sparkling Manhattan, resembling a constellation he had once seemed to pull from the very sky. He looked more emaciated than he had imagined. Cancer, like a merciless predator, devoured what had once been an imposing figure. But his eyes, when they met, were sharp, like shards of broken glass. "Christopher," he whispered, and tears like crystal beads rolled down his hollowed cheeks. "You have Patricia's eyes. I've seen them in my dreams for 38 years. He slowly approached, unsure how to act, unsure how to address this unfamiliar yet related person. The old man resolved his doubts himself, extending a hand. His fingers were thin, like bones, but his grip remained surprisingly strong. "Let me look at you," he requested. "My son, my boy, they told me you were dead, but I always knew the truth. A father's heart cannot be deceived." They talked for about an hour. Sterling, like an information-hungry traveler, asked questions about his life, wincing at the descriptions of poverty, struggle, and the cruelty of Dennis and Marlene. "I betrayed you," he repeated bitterly. "I should have protected you, but I failed." "You couldn't have known," he tried to reassure him. "Dorothy deceived everyone." Sterling's expression abruptly changed as if a shadow passed through his eyes. Tell him, he addressed Blackstone. He needs to know the whole truth. Blackstone pulled out a folder he kept constantly with him like a valuable artifact. During our investigation into Dorothy's past, we stumbled upon an unexpected detail. Dorothy's maiden name was not Wilson, as she stated in her employment documents. Her real surname was Rothwell. Silence settled in the room, broken only by the steady hum of medical equipment. He looked questioningly at Sterling, whose face was contorted with a fresh wave of grief. "She was my sister," he said. "My half-sister, the product of my father's shameful affair." Sterling's father, your grandfather, had a fleeting affair with a housemaid in 1955, Blackstone explained. Dorothy was the result. The family, seeking to conceal this disgrace, paid the woman to disappear and never make contact again. But Dorothy, learning the truth about her father after her mother's death, decided to seek justice when she turned 18. Father gave her $50,000 to leave, Sterling continued, bitterness in his voice. He made her sign papers guaranteeing she would never contact our family again, but she needed more than just money. She craved recognition. She dreamed of becoming a Rothwell. Dorothy craved recognition, dreamed of bearing the Rothwell name, a name she believed was rightfully hers. Corral added that Dorothy returned under a false name and with fake references, getting hired as a maid. For 2 years she worked in Sterling's house, observing his life with Patricia, seeing him enjoy what she believed was meant for her. Blackstone produced a leather diary found in Dorothy's Cleveland apartment, where she kept detailed entries. Dorothy's handwriting was uneven, seemingly infused with malice. One entry read, "Sterling has everything because he was born lucky. His son will inherit billions, while my children will have nothing. But if I take the boy and raise him as my own, he will still get everything, only through me. I will be his mother, the one he loves. The money will come to my family where it belongs." Sterling, tightening his grip on Christopher's hand, said that Dorothy didn't just kidnap him from a billionaire, she stole him from her own brother. She raised his son as her own, watching from afar as he built his empire, knowing she was hiding his most precious treasure from him. Christopher, trying to process what he had heard, asked about Harold, Dennis, and Marlene. Blackstone confirmed that Dennis and Marlene were Harold's children from a previous marriage. Dorothy could not have children, as she told everyone, and married Harold to have a ready-made family in which to hide Christopher. Sterling coughed, blood appearing on his lips. Waving away the approaching nurse, he gasped that he had already transferred everything to Christopher, who now owned a $2.4 billion fortune. Coral would confirm this with documentation. Then, pulling Christopher closer so he could smell the medicine and impending death, Sterling added that Dorothy's diary mentioned other cases, other maids, other kidnapped children. She was part of something bigger, and Christopher must find them and bring them home. Sterling died 2 weeks later, holding Christopher's hand and whispering his mother's name, Patricia. At the funeral, attended by New York's elite, Dennis and Marlene appeared in ill-fitting suits. Dennis tried to address Christopher as his brother, but Christopher stopped him, stating he never was, and that was Dorothy's doing. Marlene, changing her tone to pleading, said they had raised him and were family, to which Christopher reminded them how they had kicked him out of the hospital, left him homeless, taken his last $300, and called him a bastard. 6 months later, Christopher stood in the office that had once belonged to Sterling, gazing at the snow-covered Manhattan skyline. The city, which once seemed like another planet, now bore his name on 3 buildings. The leather chair still held the scent of Sterling's cologne, and Christopher found himself wanting to ask him a question before remembering he was no longer there. Christopher's first order of business was to write 2 checks for $50,000 each, one for Dennis, one for Marlene. His lawyers thought he was insane, reminding him they had no legal rights and had treated him horribly. But Christopher, signing the checks, replied that it wasn't about them, but about who he wanted to be. Dennis cashed his check immediately, while Marlene returned hers, torn into small pieces, with a note wishing Christopher would choke on his billions. Christopher ordered his assistant to frame it and hang it in his private bathroom as a daily reminder that money doesn't cure hatred, it merely amplifies what was already there. The Burke Lakefront Shelter received an anonymous donation of $10 million, exactly 6 months after 2 men in suits found Christopher in their food line. He personally delivered the donation, dressed in the same clothes he had worn in those days. Mrs. Holstead, the director, recognized him immediately, remembering how she had given him extra blankets on cold nights. The woman who ran the shelter, where he once found solace on cold nights, immediately recognized the former Nathan in him. She spoke his name, but then corrected herself, remembering the tragic events. "Christopher, right?" she asked. Nathan assured her that the name suited him. He emphasized that it was as Nathan that he received help in his time of need, and Christopher was just the name on the checks. Seeing the donation amount, the woman couldn't hold back her tears. She exclaimed that this money would be enough for 20 years of work, for expansion, for adding mental health services and vocational training programs. Christopher replied that he would need her help with a much bigger endeavor. Thus, 3 months later, the Patricia Rothwell Foundation was established with a capital of $100 million. Its mission was both simple and incredibly complex: to find the other stolen children mentioned in Dorothy's diaries. Blackstone, appointed director of the foundation, quickly identified a pattern. He reported at the first board meeting that from 1980 to 1990, 17 wealthy families reported the kidnapping of infants who were never found. In 12 cases, a housekeeper or nanny was fired or disappeared shortly before the abduction. Dorothy's diaries contained the names of 3 more women: Linda, Susan, and Marie. It was suggested that they acted together. The first kidnapped child was found 8 months later. In Detroit, a man named Michael Thompson learned he was actually Michael Pearson, heir to a pharmaceutical empire. His mother, Linda, had died 5 years prior, taking the secret to her grave. Michael was reunited with his biological father, who for 35 years believed his son had died in a botched kidnapping. The second discovery was more difficult. Susan raised her daughter Jennifer in poverty in rural Kentucky, while Jennifer's biological parents searched for her worldwide. The reunion made headlines everywhere. Jennifer embraced parents she never knew existed, while simultaneously trying to comprehend the lies that had enveloped her life. But it was the third case that proved most painful for Christopher. Marie didn't just steal a child, she kidnapped twins, separated them, selling one to a desperate couple in Canada and raising the other as her own in Phoenix. The twins were 29 when they were found. They had lived their entire lives within 300 meters of each other, each feeling something was missing, unaware of the existence of a twin brother, searching for the same answers. 14 months after Sterling's death, Dennis tried to sue Christopher, demanding $50 million in damages for the pain and suffering caused by Dorothy's deception. The case was dismissed in minutes. After that, Dennis flooded him with letters, alternating threats and pleas, until Coral obtained a restraining order. Marlene simply vanished, though rumors reached Christopher that she had married in Florida and told everyone her brother had died. Christopher kept Dorothy's photograph, the one he had snatched from her apartment on that fateful day. Not out of love or nostalgia, but as a reminder. She stole him from a family, deprived Sterling of the chance to raise a son, deprived him of the chance to know his mother before her death. But she also taught him a valuable lesson, albeit unintentionally. In her attempt to get rich, Dorothy unwittingly showed him what it meant to be poor. Every decision he made, every donation, every investment in finding stolen children stemmed from knowing both sides of the coin. He was homeless and a billionaire, a nobody and a somebody, Nathan Bridgewater and Christopher Rothwell. Standing in the penthouse, looking out at the snow falling on the city built by Sterling and inherited by him, Christopher realized a truth Dorothy never understood. Family isn't blood, money, or a name on a birth certificate. It's a choice to love when it's easier to hate, a choice to build when it's easier to destroy, a choice to seek truth even when lies seem more comfortable. To date, the Rothwell Foundation has found 43 stolen children. Some reunions are joyful, others complex, but all are necessary. Each one is a small compensation for a massive injustice, a family restored from the ashes of someone's greed. Sterling searched for him for 38 years and found him just in time to say goodbye. Now, Christopher searches for others, hoping they will have more time than he and Sterling did. Sometimes he dreams of Dorothy, and in those dreams, he asks her if it was worth it. Did the kidnapping bring her the satisfaction she sought? Did raising her brother's son as her own fill the void where recognition should have been? She never answers in his dreams, simply looks at him with guilty eyes that he now understands saw not her stolen son, but the face of her brother looking back at her, a daily reminder of what she had done. 7 fateful words like an echo continued to resound in his mind. Dorothy Bridgewater was Sterling's biological sister. This short phrase became the key to understanding an entire life woven from lies and deceit. It exposed how greed can distort even the strongest family ties, proving that blood relation alone is not a guarantee of family, and at times can give rise to true monsters. He is Christopher Sterling Rothwell III, a child abducted by his own aunt and raised in poverty while his father desperately searched for him across the globe. He was found, but too late, only to witness his father's death. But he is also Nathan Bridgewater, a simple warehouse worker who held his dying mother's hand at the moment of her confession to destroying countless lives. He is both and neither, rich and poor, found and forever lost. The immense fortune left by Sterling does not rightfully belong to him. It belongs to every stolen child still languishing in captivity, to every family shattered by greed, to every parent who never stops searching. He is merely a temporary steward of resources capable of bringing people home. Dorothy kidnapped him for wealth that never belonged to her. Now, he intends to use that fortune to right wrongs like her own, returning abducted children to their rightful families one by one. And somewhere deep down, he hopes this will give meaning to the 38 years taken from him.